Welcome back to another watercolour painting demonstration. Today we're going to be painting a beautiful little scene in Cornwall, a little fishing village called Portloe. It's absolutely gorgeous. We're going to start by painting the sky. You can see my drawing there. I penciled in the outline of the headland, the boats, the sea, and a few things on the beach. Just loosely penciled them in. We're going to start off by painting the sky. That's going to be done with a mixture of cobalt blue and cerulean blue, using my Isobe brush, which I find very useful. First of all, I start by actually spraying the paper with a little bit of water. That just helps me actually move the paint on the paper, so I don't get really hard edges, because clouds have a combination of hard and soft edges. You don't want all hard edges, you don't necessarily want all soft edges on these type of clouds anyway. So by spraying the paper first with a mister bottle, you actually that naturally helps to soften the edges of the clouds. I'm just adding a little bit of magenta to the paint here, to the mixture, just so I work my way down to the horizon. As you actually paint the scene, you want to vary the mixture as you move along, so you're not all painting at one flat blue, unless you've got a clear blue sky with no clouds or anything. This makes for a more interesting sky, so I'm varying the mixture as I paint along, with combinations of cerulean, cobalt blue, magenta, and just gradually work my way down to the horizon. Just painting over the landmass there a little bit with the blue, so I don't get a cut out edge around the sky and the land. Just going over the clouds a little bit, just softening the edges. Now here you can see how I mix the paint on my palette. Instead of actually combining two colours or three colours together, I kind of put them on the palette but just merge them slightly, so then they have a tendency to mix more on the page and you get more of a lively colour. You can see magenta, cobalt blue, and a little bit of yellow ochre, which gives you a nice sort of grey colour for clouds. And just using the side of the brush again and working my way along. Just working, just adding a few more washes to the paper now, just to give the sky a bit more interest. What I'm going to start doing in a minute is actually painting in another wash of cobalt blue and cerulean blue over the sky area, just to bring the clouds out a little bit more, just dampening the paper a little bit more, just to help soften the edges of the clouds. And again, just using the side. Remember to use the side. Well, for me anyway, I use the side of my brush. Lots of different ways you can paint clouds. You know, you can dab out the clouds with tissue paper. There's all sorts of different techniques. I'm sure you can find lots, but this is my preferred way to use the edge of my brush going up to outline the clouds. There we go. You see, I'll keep fiddling. You shouldn't keep going back into areas once you've worked them. Can't resist it. Okay, now we'll start off with the headland. I'm just blocking in the main areas here. I'm using essentially warm colours, cadmium red, cadmium yellow, magenta, a touch of cobalt blue, just to green out the yellow a little bit. Raw sienna, just carefully painting around the cottages. On these lovely hills here, they have lots of heather and thrift that comes out in the summer months. I wanted to include some of that into the hillside. It looks beautiful. You can see how I use all of the brush. I don't just use the tip of the brush, I actually lay the brush flat on the paper and push down on it to get different effects. So you can experiment with using all of the brush, not just the tip of the brush. Now I'm just painting in where the rocks are with my first wash of cobalt blue and burnt umber. And a little bit of magenta, I think. Just varying that wash as I move along. So as I'm coming more around towards the beach, in places I'm warming it up with a little bit more burnt umber, just so it gets closer to the viewer. As you've got it's the old rule of thumb, you get cool colours in the distance and warm colours in the foreground. And that gives you a really good sense of depth in your paintings and helps with perspective. Just painting the foreground rocks in now with burnt umber, cobalt blue. You get a nice grey, a warm grey. Okay, now we're painting in the sea in the distance. I started off a bit dark and the horizon line wasn't how I wanted it, so what I did, I just painted around those rocks first. So I washed my brush out so it's clear water, and then I run it along the top just to soften the horizon line. It's not often you get the horizon line looking very hard and very sort of like a direct line. I wanted to soften the top of it with a damp brush, and that makes it look like it's disappearing more into the distance. And as I come through towards the beach, I changed the mixture from ultramarine and cadmium red to cerulean blue and Windsor yellow. Because obviously as the water goes shallow, becomes more shallow, the reflection of sand comes through and makes the water appear more green. Now I'm working up the beach. Now for the beach I was using Naples yellow. Now I think it's one of the I love Naples yellow. It's absolutely perfect for sand. I think you can mix the sand colour using lemon yellow and a little bit of something else. I'm not sure what it is. I'll have to experiment. But anyway, Naples yellow straight out of the tube is really useful. Down by the water's edge I added Naples yellow and a little bit of burnt umber together, but as I move up the beach I'll be using almost pure Naples yellow. So if you want to paint lots of beaches, get a tube of Naples yellow. It's not an expensive one. I think it's series 1, so it's quite cheap. Just in the foreground to the Naples yellow I add a little bit of magenta just to change the colour slightly, make it slightly more pink and warm it up, making the colours slightly stronger as I come towards the foreground. Now just putting a wash over the rocks on the right hand side using burnt sienna, burnt umber, cobalt blue. For the rooftops I used a wash of Naples yellow and a touch of cobalt blue, and you get a lovely grey that way. Putting a little bit more detail into the headland. I was struggling in my mind actually at this stage what to do with the headland. I didn't know whether to... before I started painting, I hadn't worked out how I was going to tackle it, because I wanted it to recede into the distance, but I also had in mind that it had quite a lot of interesting sort of shapes and shadows on it, but I didn't want it to do too much work to it, because it would appear it wouldn't sit back. And you'll see in a moment that as we progress with the painting, the headland kind of didn't look right. It looked too messy and too bitty. Can't quite explain what happened to it, but I was tempted to sort of like just throw the towel in and not carry on with the painting at this point. But I'm glad I persevered, because as I work around the painting and eventually I do more detail in the foreground, that detracts from the hillside and sets the hillside back in the painting. So basically what I'm trying to say is, if you're doing a painting, you think, oh my god, this is going wrong, which often you do when you're painting. You go through stages of good and bad. You think, oh, it's looking really good, then oh, it's not looking very good. But if you carry on to the end, that's when you'll know whether it's a success or not. I think to give up too early on a painting and abort it just because you don't think it's going right is a mistake. You see, I wasn't happy with the headland here at all, because it's too much. There's too much detail on it compared to the rest of the painting, and it looked completely out of kilter, out of sync with the rest of the painting. As the painting develops, and we get more detail on the foreground, that hillside settles down and becomes part of the painting instead of the focal part of the painting, which it is now. Just doing another wash over the sea with a stronger mix of cerulean blue and Winsor yellow. Just by adding more darks to the sea, this helped connect that landmass with the actual, with the sea. Without it looking, it started to help the situation a bit. But it's not until we actually start to paint the boats in that the painting actually starts to look more right. I'm going to deal with the foreground rocks here, just using mixtures of burnt sienna and cobalt blue. Now, this little brush I'm using now is called a sword liner brush, very useful for doing detail work and painting grass and all sorts of things, but it's also very good for drawing the veins and the cracks in rocks. They're good for waves as well. You can get a nice wave effect with them. Really useful brush to have in your painting kit. Now I've just finished painting in the kind of seaweed, the shadows you get lying underwater. I'm just blocking that in, and by doing that is helping that landmass become part of the painting. That landmass isn't standing out on its own so much now, and that gets better and better as the painting develops. Just putting another wash of burnt sienna and a little bit of cobalt blue over the foreground bit, over the middle ground type of beach area, just where the tide had come up to that day. Excuse me. Just working my way carefully around the boats. Okay, now there's a deep shadow on this rock, so I use mixtures of ultramarine blue, burnt umber, a little bit of burnt sienna, just varied the mixture and painting it with a 1/4 inch flat brush to get the rock shapes, because it's very rocky and jagged there, and I thought that a flat brush was the sort of brush I needed to portray the rocks. I left certain areas just where the light was hitting the bits of rock there, reflections and stuff. I kind of left the highlights behind, not being too fussy, just leaving areas of interest. Just finishing off the grass area with a shadow. You see, I'm using a big brush. I'm not using fiddly little brushes to try and paint every blade of grass. Okay, now we're going to start on the boats. Just using a mixture of cad yellow. Sorry, was that cad yellow? I think it's Winsey yellow and cerulean blue. No, cad yellow, sorry, and cerulean blue. Just to block in the shapes of the boat. Just loosely. Now when we start getting the boats in, that gives us a foreground, and it really does help the painting a lot. And the other boat was a mixture of ultramarine blue and cad red. Just a touch cadmium red, very strong colour, so you just want to put the tip of your brush in there, not a lot at all. Okay, now I'm painting in the hull using burnt sienna, a touch of cadmium red. Not being too fussy and worrying about it too much, just blocking in the colours, because there's going to be a lot of shadow under there in a minute, cast by the boats. So you don't have to be too fussy. Slightly darker mix. The same ultramarine and cadmium red and burnt sienna with a little bit of ultramarine in it. Okay, now we're going to paint the shadows on the boat. I'll try and move the video along at a reasonable speed so people don't get bored watching me paint just one area for too long. If you think I'm moving it along too quickly and you're missing things you want to see, just let me know in the comments, and I'll try and change things next time. Now I thought that shadow was too dark, so what I do in a minute is rinse my brush out and lift some of that colour out with a damp brush, just to lighten it slightly in places. Just there, look. So just lifting that, and I think that really helps a lot. Just makes the shadows look a bit more lively. Now I'm painting the shadow on the boat. Cadmium yellow and more cobalt blue to make it slightly darker, with a touch of magenta. That all of a sudden makes the boats look more three-dimensional. I'm not going to worry about too much detail on the boats. I'm just going to, like I said, I'm trying to make a sort of very loose painting here. Not too tight. Not too much detail. Just trying to get the lights and darks in to create a nice hot sunny feel, plenty of light in the painting. Because I think that's the secret to good watercolour painting, is light and atmosphere. That's working on the other boat with a darker mix of ultramarine and cadmium red with a touch of yellow ochre. And I'll use that same colour to just drop in the shadows and on the top of the boat. The watercolour paper I'm using is called Arche, spelt A-R-C-H-E. It's Arche £140, and the surface is what they call knot. So it's between a hot pressed paper and a rough paper. Knot is the paper in between, and it gives you enough tooth. That's the surface of the paper, they called a tooth, to create some good effects. I do use rough paper, but I'm not as keen on rough paper as I am. I just find that the knot surface meets most of my needs. It's worth paying for a decent paper, because if you can afford it, because you do get better results. A really cheap watercolour paper is very difficult to paint with. Now just painting in the little boat. Sketching it in with a couple of colours. Now I think you can see now the boats are in the foreground, how the painting is starting to come together a bit more. That headland doesn't look so dominant now. Now just using what's called dry brush here to indicate where the seaweed is, and that's just a bit of burnt umber, or burnt sienna, sorry, and I'm just dragging the brush across the paper. So it's just quite not a lot of paint on there. It's quite just a damp brush, quite dry, and it's just dragging the paint. And that's the tooth of the paper. What we were talking about earlier is just catching the paint and giving that nice textured effect. Right, this hill was casting a nice big juicy shadow on the beach. I painted that with burnt umber, cobalt blue. Excuse me. Got a cough and I can't shift it. There we go. Just to finish off that last little bit. I added a little bit of Naples yellow to it there, just to make it slightly greyer and match in with the beach a bit, to sort of unify it. I think in this painting I probably only used about 6 or 7 colours, maybe 6 colours, and I always find that you only use a few colours. Actually, what it does, it actually helps to tie your painting in more. So try not to use too many colours. Well, coming to the end now of the demonstration, almost there. Just fiddling around with these little boxes in the foreground. Got to put, when that dries, I'll put a little bit of shadow on there. Just using my rigger now to draw in the lines, the mooring lines that come in off the boat. Just one little sweep there, look. That's what a good brush it is. So useful for ropes, rigging, grass, twigs, trees, branches. Popping in the shadow. Well, thanks ever so much for watching this. Well, if you got this far and you watched it and you've enjoyed it, I'm very grateful. If you can give us a thumbs up and share the video and subscribe, I'll be grateful. Keep watching my channel for the upcoming videos over the next couple of weeks. We'll be doing some more simple watercolours and probably some more complicated ones. And we're all done, we're finished. Thanks ever so much for watching. Come back again soon and watch another one. Bye bye for now.